Hey y'all, today is Friday, October the 9th, and this is the 19th edition of Book Fun Friday. Welcome. So, the young adult novel I'm going to be talking about today is titled The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy, and it's written by Mackenzi Lee. Now, that author's name probably sounds familiar to you, and that's because 2 weeks ago in my last book talk, I book talked her other novel that's titled The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. That was actually book one in the series. So now the book I'm going to talk about today is the sequel to that book. I don't normally do sequels, but because I love the first one so much, I had to read the second one. And the second one is just as good, if not better, than that first one. So I'm so excited to talk to you about it today. Now, I don't know if you remember, but the original book one, Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, the main character in that book is a young man whose name is Monty. And he's kind of a troublemaker kind of kid who likes to party and drink and gamble and date. And he's actually gotten kicked out of this exclusive private school and sent back home, which has infuriated his father. And so his father decides that he gets one more shot at getting his act together. And so he decides to send Monty out on this grand European tour where he's supposed to become enculturated and settled. And so when he comes back home, he's ready to take over the family business and be a proper gentleman. Well, along the trip, this grand tour that Monty's supposed to take, he's supposed to drop his sister, Felicity, off at finishing school. Well, if you saw my book talk 2 weeks ago, you know that none of that happened. Things completely went awry. And so at the end of book one, Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, Monty and Felicity, his sister, and Monty's best friend Percy end up in a completely different place than they had set out to be at the beginning of the book. This book then tells the story of Felicity and what happened to her after the whole grand tour going to finishing school fell apart. So Felicity is a young woman living in 1700s Europe, and her one wish is to become a medical doctor. Well, you can imagine no opportunities for a woman to become a medical doctor at this time. And as the story opens, she's in a comfortable relationship with a man who would offer her security and home and comforts. But she doesn't love him, and she's really not interested in settling down with anyone, including him. And so when that relationship comes to an end, she realizes that she's going to have to figure something out for herself. And so she's in Scotland with this gentleman, and then she comes to London to be with her brother for a little bit and see if she can get her feet under her. And she decides to, under false pretenses, get an interview at a medical institute in the hopes that if she speaks her case passionately enough to this board of doctors, they'll admit her to their school. So I'm going to share the passage where she goes and makes her appeal to these male doctors on this board who would decide whether or not she can get into their school. The chairman tosses his cloak over his shoulders and gives me a smile that he likely thinks is kind, but is in fact the smirk of a man about to explain something to a woman that she already knows. There's nothing more to hear. Your case is contained within that single statement. You're a woman, Miss Montague, and women are not permitted to study at the hospital. It's our policy. I take a step toward the bench. That policy is antiquated and foolish, sir. Oh, antiquated is quite a large word, madam, he says. So is patronizing, I think, but I bite my tongue. Most of the board is listening. I have a sense that more than anything, they're hoping to have a good story to share at the pub. So I take the attention I'm offered. Have you previously studied medicine at a hospital or academic institution? The chairman asks. No, sir. Have you had any kind of formal schooling? He's baiting me. I was educated at home, and I've read quite a lot of books. That isn't healthy for you, one of the other men interrupts. Reading in excess causes the female brain to shrink. Oh, for God's sake, I burst out, my temper snatching the reins. You can't actually believe that. The man leans backward, as though I frightened him. But another one leans in and adds, if you've read so many books, why do you need a hospital education? Because a hospital education is required in order to obtain licensure and establish a practice, I say, and because reading books on human bones is not adequate preparation for setting a broken leg when the wound is bloody and the bone has splintered under the skin and is already starting to fester with gangrene. A man on the end with a pointed chin and tufts of coarse blonde hair sticking out from under his wig raises his eyebrows at that. Then let a man set the bone, and let a woman see the injured has a good meal and a bed, he says, loud enough for everyone to hear. There's a smattering of laughter from these men with clean fingernails who hardly know the color of blood. The chairman flicks his gaze in their direction, but does nothing to silence them. Miss Montague, he says, his eyes returning to mine, I have no doubt that you are very bright for a young lady. But even if we were to consider admitting a female to our student ranks, the cost necessary to make arrangements for her. What arrangements, sir? I interrupt. Well, to begin, she would be unable to attend anatomy dissections. Why? Do you think my nerves are so weak and fragile that I couldn't handle the sight? The women on the streets of London witness more death and dying in a single day than you likely have in your lifetime. I have yet to meet a woman with a stomach for the sort of dissections we undertake, he says, not to mention the nakedness of the male form, which would be inappropriate for you to see outside the bonds of marriage. I sigh. I can assure you, sir, I would not become hysterical. You seem hysterical now, he says. I'm not, I reply, annoyed that my voice pitches. I'm speaking passionately. So that was Felicity's voice, and you can imagine how well that goes. Obviously, it doesn't go well. And so she's quite discouraged that evening, and so she and her brother and Percy, that's her brother's best friend, decide to sort of soothe themselves that evening by going to a pub. And they meet up with a group of friends, some people that they knew from book one who were pirates. And in the course of the conversation with meeting up with these friends, Felicity begins discussing a friend of hers who's getting married in Germany. And one of the pirates, who's a female, actually offers to give her passage to Germany to her friend's wedding. And it turns out, interestingly, that her friend is actually marrying a doctor. And so Felicity thinks, I mean, this doctor's a big deal in medicine. Maybe if I go to their wedding and I meet him and can convince him, he can get me maybe into his medical institute. And so they set out for this to happen. Well, you can imagine, things don't always go as planned for these folks, and they certainly don't go as planned for Felicity either. I want to close with just a short passage here. This is toward the end of the book. And the characters in this passage are Felicity, of course, and Sim, S-I-M, that's the name of the female pirate who is transporting her on this boat, and Joanna, who is her friend who's getting married. And the three of these women have had some adventures at this point, and things have happened here and things have happened there. And we're at a point in the story where Felicity is just reflecting on what it's like to be a woman and the difficulties that the three of them together, have overcome in this short time together, and maybe what the future could look like for women who come after them. So I'm going to close with this little passage here. I look at Sim, and she looks at Joanna, and Joanna looks at me, and I realize that in that single moment, like a flash of heat lightning over a bare moor, all three of us are in control of our own futures, our own lives, where we go now, maybe for the first time. With my side pressed to Joanna's and Sim's dark eyes meeting mine, I feel newer than I ever have been. Everyone has heard stories of women like us, cautionary tales, morality plays, warnings of what will befall you if you are a girl too wild for this world, a girl who asks too many questions or wants too much. If you set off into the world alone. Everyone has heard stories of women like us, and now we will make more of them. And again, this is titled The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy. It's by Mackenzi Lee, and it's book 2 that comes after The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. Well, y'all, thank you so much as always for watching. I do appreciate you. I continue to hope that you are well, that your friends and family are well, and that you stay that way. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you for the 20th edition of Book Fun Friday. Bye-bye.